small conference.
And that kind of gave life back to my performing after the belly dance community. So I don't know if you know this.
I probably don't.
No, you probably do. But special interest communities in Utah, and particularly in Salt Lake, tend to have a very specific culture. I'll just say sub-communities or like alt communities tend to have a very specific culture. And it's kind of like people came and they saw like the greater Utah culture and they're like, well, I don't like that, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to make my own group and we're going to be different. But then they don't do any of the self-examination to actually rid themselves of the parts of the culture that they didn't like. So they just bring some of the more toxic, like subversive stuff with them. So I had that experience with the belly dance community, and I actually have a really powerful spoken word piece that I put out about it. There's a lot of stuff about sisterhood, and there's a lot of stuff about like supporting each other, but then there are really extreme paywalls. There are really extreme walls around experience, around like what style you perform and this, that, and the other. And I took a break for about a year. This was years and years ago. I took a break for about a year. I'd been like every performance, every festival, I was in it. And I took a year off. And when I came back, I was just like, this is kind of gross. Like, we've got all these people and we're talking about body positivity and we're talking about this stuff, but we're also selling classes about weight that are focused around weight loss and trimming your waist and hiding. We've got products for hiding your arms and hiding your belly, and makeup tutorials for how to make your fat face look thin, and just all of this stuff and around hyper femininity, you know. And so I left, and then I didn't dance for years until I found the Behind the Zion Curtain and other variety shows. And that got me more into the burlesque community, which has way fewer of those problems. And so, yeah, so now I do that, except not right now because the world. Yeah.
So before we go too far down, can you briefly introduce yourself to our audience? Your name, a little bit on your background, and then we'll kind of pick up the conversation again.
Yeah. Okay, so I've just forgotten everything about myself. My name is Jack. I go by Jack. I am a performer. I'm a local artist. I make stuff. I volunteer up at the VA as a peer support provider. I'm part of the local outreach community. I do projects with friends to help feed our houseless neighbors. I do just a huge range of like community support and community outreach, volunteering, and I'm a cat parent.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just kind of dabble and like tool around and try to be part of neat stuff.
Can you talk a little bit more about your community outreach?
Yeah, so my friends started a community outreach project where we ask for donations, and then every week we go and we just do a big like Costco or Sam's Club shop, and we get hygiene kits, we get menstrual supplies, we get dental care supplies, and then we have a hygiene kit, like baby wipes, we do toothbrushes, mouthwash, toothpaste, like I said, menstrual supplies, pads and tampons. Kleenexes, Band-Aids, just stuff you don't have when you're houseless. And then with that, we attach a bag so we've got like salty snacks, sweet snacks, we pudding, applesauce, we try and get fresh fruit in there every week. And then, sports drinks, so electrolytes, and then water, and we just cram our cars full once a week, and we go downtown and we just kind of blast the local camps with that stuff.
Okay.
We also started during the week, during the summer, because it got wildly hot this year. Just one or two of us will just go get extra cases of water, and we'll go down once or twice during the week and just disseminate water out to the camps and stuff. So if anyone, can I pitch?
Oh yeah, 100%. Plug in everything you can.
So the donation account right now is kale-morse. So that's Kale, like the plant, -morse, like the code, and that's on Venmo. and we spend about $600 every week. And it's not uncommon for the people who are doing the volunteering, who organize the packets and stuff, to put money in out of their own pockets. So just a little bit every week would really, really help.
And so I'm guessing at this time you have a pretty good team. You need more gifts than you need volunteers.
Yes. Yeah. We've got a solid group, and we do the assembly in my home. So I don't want a ton of people just coming in and out of my home in the current circumstances. Hard gifts are really welcome. We've had people who have donated boxes of masks, which is lovely. That's one of our more expensive purchases. If anybody wants to donate a case of like a sport drink, Gatorade, Costco has just a generic sport drink that's like 75 cents per bottle, which is awesome. We had somebody just this week donate a box of like 150 bottles of hand sanitizer, which is lovely, perfect. Like I was saying, baby wipes, the little Kleenex individual packs, Band-Aids, just anything that you think would be beneficial. If anyone has a line on like the little travel bottles of sunscreen, that would be amazing.
Okay.
And then as fall comes on, more donations for like socks, thin blankets, layering clothes, stuff like that are going to be really, really important. Hats, big on hats.
And remind me, how long have you been doing this for?
Oh, so it's been about 2 months
Okay.
now, and this has just been a group of friends that's getting together and doing it. We're not part of a larger organization. We have, the food handling is taken care of in a permitted way, and that's all above board. But yeah, it's just been a couple months, and it's amazing to go out, and we're starting to get to know people in the different areas. We'll see somebody, in a camp on 7th South that we saw last week over on 5th, and so we're able to start checking in with our neighbors, and we're starting to be able to organize, because we do have a lot of people who don't have money, but they want to help, so they want to volunteer. And we've started being able to organize small groups. So like just this week, I think I can't remember if it was Thursday or Friday, but just this week, an order was issued for the police to go out and abate some of the camps, disperse some of the camps.
Mm-hmm.
And when they do that, what they do is they show up with a trailer and with trucks and with a large body of police, and they go through the camps and they order people to leave. And then people are trying to pack up, because people accumulate stuff,
Of course.
especially when they're able to stay in a camp for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're getting like bottles of water and cleaner and all that kind of stuff, and they try and store it and organize it. And the police will come through, and if people don't get out of the camp fast enough, they'll just take their belongings and throw them in a trailer, and then that trailer gets driven to the dump and tossed.
Okay.
So they steal all of these people's belongings and they throw them out. And now the people are starting out, they live outdoors, they have no money, they don't have access to fresh water or hygiene facilities, and now everything they've managed to collect and build up is gone. So we've been able to get a couple groups together to go out and film police conduct when that's happening. Weirdly, I don't know if you're aware of this, cops a lot of the time tend to act differently in front of light-skinned people holding cameras than when they're unobserved.
Yeah, very true.
So we've been able to just minimize some of the dehumanizing behavior. And more help for that is always good.
Mm-hmm.
There's a group, they haven't been able to come out and help with that kind of stuff yet because they're really low on volunteers, but if people do want to help and they're worried about going to protests and stuff like that, the National Lawyers Guild is always looking for legal observers, and if they can build up enough of a base, and it's not a new program nationally, it's a new program here to Utah, but if they can build up enough of a base, we may be able to start providing coverage for events like the camp abatements, which would be awesome.
So can I ask you why? Why are you getting involved in these projects? Like, is there any kind of tie-in there?
So, I mean, I would love to have, an inspiring, I was homeless and I found my way, and, but I've experienced homelessness. It was by choice at the time, and I had a lot more resources than most people without a house do. But the fact of the matter is that they're people, and being poor is a punishable offense in our country. With the current political environment, the pandemic, the heat, the differences in police conduct from now to like even just last fall, people need help. And this isn't a time where I feel like I can sit home and go, oh, someone should do that. I'm someone, you know, so I do. And the people I'm connected with, the groups I'm connected with, when I say groups, like groups of friends,
Of course.
just the people I have in my life inspire me to take action like that. There's this concept in our culture that like, if you want to get out and help, if you want to do homeless organization, if you want to do this kind of stuff, that you need to be part of a larger organization. You need to be a chapter in a national organization. You need to have experience. You know, you need all these things. We're so used to the idea of having to purchase or earn our way into social effect, and it's just not true. So when I see stuff, I try and do what I can if I have the internal resources for it.
No, we need more people like that, obviously. Utah community, the Utah community is definitely budding, and I love to hear stories like this because although we aren't as heavily populated as other areas, there's a lot of people who really want to help and make this a better community for everyone here.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, there's also, just to put this out there, a lot of people know about this already. They've gotten really big. But there's the Salt Lake COVID Mutual Aid. They're a group on Facebook, and they're an organizational group, and they do a lot of, people can go on there and say, you know, I just lost my job. I don't have, I have to choose between food and rent this week. And then the COVID Mutual Aid, they have, and you know, they're organizing a database of people who like, so this person last week came on and said, hey, I'm going through my food storage and I found an extra 50-pound bag of rice, and I have all of these canned items, and I have some fresh, you know, frozen stuff in my freezer. Does anybody need it? And they'll go, oh, okay, these two people need to connect. And they're helping out the community that way, and they're allowing people to help each other, which is really awesome. So big shout out for them as well.
And again, can you remind me the name on
It's
Facebook?
the Salt Lake COVID Mutual Aid program, and you can just look that up on Facebook.
To back up a little bit, can you tell me a little bit about where you were raised?
Yeah.
Do you have family here in Utah?
No.
How long have you been in Utah? Like all that stuff.
So I've lived in Salt Lake for, I think I'm coming up on 15 years now. I moved here after I spent 3 years overseas in Germany with the Air Force. And my husband at the time had family in Salt Lake, so we moved here. And then when we split up, I just stayed. I grew up in southern Idaho, so like Pocatello, Boise, Downey, Meridian, like Shelley, these little tiny towns. Boise's not little tiny, but yeah. And you know, I was raised by a single parent. I was raised by my mom. She had very severe mental health issues. She ended up going to prison for 7 years when I was 10. So I spent 7 years either in informal foster care, where I was staying with like family members and friends of the family, or as a ward of the state until I was 17. And then you know, she worked her magic and convinced me to move back in with her. And I joined the military because for a lot of low-income people who've come from a difficult background, I think that's fair to say. That seems like a really good option on its face. So I did that, and spent the time overseas, came back, spent time here in Utah, and let me say, I think it's safe to say, I'm trying to do the math in my head and figure out where I was when everything happened. So if I left in 2005 and I got back here, and then, yeah, I think it's safe to say that the last 9 or 10 years, my primary focus, like, you know, I'm dancing and I'm learning how to knit and spin yarn and all this stuff, but my primary focus has been working on my mental health and recovering from my childhood. And now I am at a place, so last year I was able to attend a specific retreat out in Cincinnati that focused on a therapy called cognitive processing therapy, specifically for PTSD. And it's severe PTSD, by the way. I know I didn't mention that, but yeah. And so I was able to attend that, and that was life-changing. It's been life-changing. While I was there, I was introduced to a career field called peer support. And this is people who are in recovery. They've had mental health issues, they've had substance use issues, and then they have made their way to a place where they consider themselves in active recovery. And once you're in active recovery for a year, you can attend a training. It's a 2-week training. They have it here in the salt. They have it here in the state.
Yeah.
And then you get to act as it's a paraprofessional position, so you're kind of a half step between clients and therapy providers. I don't provide therapy, I don't do processing, I don't do any of that, but I can do skills coaching, I can do general information, I can share my story, my recovery story. I can help people. There's a format called motivational interviewing, where you work with people not to figure out the problem and tell them what to do with it, but to find out what they feel like needs to change, and then help them identify ways that they are capable of changing, that they think are going to work for them. So that's part of that mentality, is part of a bigger shift in the psychological community and the mental health care community, where we're moving away from the doctor-centered model of like, well, the DSM says this, and so here are your meds, and here's the recommended course of treatment. Now you'll be better. Away from that, more into, okay, so these are the issues that you're struggling with. Which of these do you want to be different? Okay. Like, what do you, let's say it's, you're not in good shape. Like, you feel like you're like physically unhealthy. Okay, so do you want to change that with exercise? Do you want to change it with diet? Do you want to change it at all? Like, and really just talking to people and finding out where they want to go. And then helping them understand that they have the power, they have the ability to get there with just a little bit of feedback and support.
So kind of what I'm hearing, helping others in your situation almost it sounds like it's therapeutic for you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And not just therapeutic, so I'm sure you've heard the old adage about, the teacher learns more than the student, or it's something like that, and then that's true. It's the same as when I was teaching belly dance. It's the same when I teach knitting or anything like that. When I'm teaching these coping skills, I get to understand, this is, like I've let my personal mindfulness practice slip. And I'm sitting here telling this person, mindfulness really helps with that. Oh, come on, Jack, I'm going to go home and meditate. And so it helps keep me on track. It helps me understand more about my own experience. And it's healing. It's encouraging. It's educational. It's just, I can't say enough positive things about the experience of supporting other people. And I don't always do a perfect job. Nobody does. But it's transformative to really throw yourself into, like, I'm going to be here for this and do what I can.
When you were going through, a rough spot, what would you tell someone? Like, what would you wish someone would have told you during that time?
Oof.
To help you get over some things?
The biggest thing in my life, the biggest message that I would have gotten is that you understand your experience. That's not right. You know your experience better than anybody else. You may not always understand it. You may not understand your reactions. You may not understand why you feel a certain way. but other people can't understand what you're living better than you. So listen to yourself, trust yourself. And I spent so many years, especially in my 20s and early 30s, trying desperately to get feedback from other people and like, you know, get my identity based on input from partners and things like that. And if I feel like if I'd gotten the messages earlier on in a really supportive way that I'm complete, you're complete without anybody else, without anything else. And it may not ever feel like that, but you have what you need and you're capable. And just throwing positivity and love and affirmations. That's what I would do.
No, I can definitely feel that. I am going through an awakening as with all this stuff happening right now. Kind of looking back at a lot of things that being a little too apologetic for who I am and realizing that, you know, like you said, I'm complete. I don't necessarily need that confirmation from people who don't know my story. And I think the things you said can relate to a lot of our audience members, but it also relates to me. So I feel like that was spot on.
Now, I want to ask you a question now that you've said that. And again, this is kind of a question to you, but this is also for just like the larger ears of people who see this. Do you, like you say, okay, you're coming to this awareness that you are complete. Do you feel complete?
No, I don't think I ever will.
Right. And those two things can exist at the same time. Like you can totally be this one thing and never feel like it and never like really internalize that. And that doesn't mean you should stop.
Exactly. I think that's a really well put together thought, because if we are seeking for perfection, it's not something that's always achievable, and perfection changes based off of who is looking at that. And you don't necessarily want to start putting yourself down because you don't necessarily feel complete, but you also want to be complete.
Right.
And being in that like middle ground of the situation, I think is sometimes a healthy place. As long as you're aware of it and you want to continue the growth, I think we as a society will continue to grow and be a healthier space for everyone around us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there's an extra, I have such a weird relationship with Utah. I think there's an extra layer here of that. You know, people make jokes about like the Stepford Wives and things. I think there's a little extra layer here of like performative personality and performative belonging, where, you know, like we talked earlier about this issue with like subcultures and countercultures in the area. And so we have it's really ingrained in the culture here that if you just pay for this class, if you just graduate this program, if you just, you know, present yourself physically in this way, if you can just get accepted, then it'll be okay. And it's never okay. Yep. You don't reach a point where you get to stop performing. If you get in the door by performing, you are going to perform the rest of the time you're there.
Yep.
So it's never okay. You're never safe. And then you're never yourself. And there's just culturally, there's so little value on individuality and on true like self-awareness and self-acceptance here, that it's really common for people to feel, you know, like I don't belong and I need to. And you don't. You really don't. Like, it's wonderful to belong, and you should definitely keep looking for your people, but don't look for a group that will accept you. Look for a group that's excited to have you there.
And to switch pages a little bit, tell me a little bit more about this culinary. Is it?
Oh yeah. So so I started growing mushrooms this year. I'm assuming that's what you meant.
Yes, that's exactly what
good.
that is. Yeah.
I was worried for a second. You're like, we're asking here, and I was like, so I started growing mushrooms this year, you know, because COVID, and I got real tired of yarn. Like, I never thought I would say that in my life. I was so sick of yarn crafts by like late May. That I just needed something else. So I started growing houseplants, and then I moved into a new apartment where I had a lot more space. And I was like, I decided, so with all of the stories about, you know, workers in the meat packing plants struggling with COVID and not being given PPE, stories about, the grocery store workers and the whole, people are going in and and screaming at grocery store workers and making these huge messes and just
Yeah.
like going in and insisting they don't have to wear a mask. And there's people who are faking disabilities and wearing those like can't mask, don't ask cards, which isn't a thing. That's not a thing. That's not a thing. And all of this happening, and I just wanted to get as far away as possible from the commercial food chain. And I've been kind of leaning plant-based for the last year or so anyway, and it was just the final straw. So I eat a mostly vegan diet now. And you need a lot of iron and B12.
Oh, I can only imagine.
I was not aware of how big of a deal that was going to be, and so I started growing mushrooms. And so I'm growing there's chicken of the woods and lion's mane and oyster mushrooms, and so I have just like this. It's this burgeoning setup in my apartment where I've got like a rack with its own mini greenhouse, and it's super exciting to go down and see them change every day and like work with the mycelium and transfer things to different plots of substrate, and it's become this whole thing. I do want to encourage, if anybody out there wants a hobby that feels productive and feels satisfying and is educational, look into it. Like, get a kit, go on Etsy to get a kit. Don't get them from like Amazon, but yeah, get a kit. And they're fungi, like they just grow. So there's a lot of the culture that's like, oh, you need to have this equipment, blah blah blah. You don't. You don't. Just get a kit and grow some mushrooms and eat them. It's delicious. It's fun. You'll feel amazing about yourself. Yeah.
So it's practically easy to start. Like, I could easily go and do a little bit of research and just start the process.
Yeah. So there is a bit of a paywall if you want to go the kit route. You can also, there's a local group. They just had their fall foray yesterday morning. I think it's the Utah Mushroom Society. It's like $20 for a year membership, and I believe they do 2 outings a year. It might just be 1, but I think it's 2, where it's part of your membership. You go with them, and they will take you out into the hills around Salt Lake and teach you how to hunt mushrooms and provide information about the best field guides and all of that kind of stuff. And then you can go out, and if you really wanted to, you could go out and you could find these mushrooms, and you could go home and take a spore print and then start cultivating your own stuff. So there's a lot of ways to do it. It either takes money or work, but it is accessible. And it's not, people make it sound super complicated. A lot of the information is geared toward commercial growers. So they're like, oh, you gotta have a clean room and a still air box and blah, blah, blah. I am like a walking kitchen fire in that arena, and I am here to tell you, I'm living proof that you don't need all of that stuff, and it is an accessible, functional hobby, and it's really satisfying to just be able to walk downstairs and like pull something out of the fridge that I cultivated and put that in a pan and then have a meal. Yeah.
Do you spend more time foraging or growing?
Growing.
Okay.
Growing by far. Yeah. Foraging. I don't like hiking.
Oh, no, either do I. No, and we live in Utah, which is shocking, right? But yeah, I do not like hiking.
I'm not a skier either, so people occasionally are just like, why do you live here? I'm like, I don't know. I struggle with the culture and the counterculture, and I don't like the outdoors. I don't know what I'm doing. So I grow a lot more.
Okay.
And, we live in the desert, so like during the summer, it's hard to find stuff. But yeah, there's a lot you can do with it.
Do you have any pets?
I do. I have a cat. I adopted a cat last year. His name's Iliad, like the Odyssey and the Iliad. And he's giant. He's this huge, it looks like I'm exaggerating, and I'm not exaggerating. He's enormous. He's like a 23-pound cat. I have no idea what kind of breed he is. He's just this like fluffy, majestic looking like black animal, and he's just kind of meh. And he saves my life on a regular basis. So one of the side effects I live with, one of the symptoms from my PTSD, so I actually live with complex PTSD, which is similar but separate animal from incident-based PTSD. And one of the symptoms I live with is suicidal ideation. It's kind of just always present. That's what a lot of people don't understand about, especially complex or prolonged traumatic response, is that when you get to a certain place, a lot of the time, for a lot of people, it's just kind of always there in the back of your mind, just sort of floating around. Hey, you could die today. You could go do that. And then when I'm not sleeping well, when I'm stressed about something, when there's discord, when I feel dissonance, between my experience and what someone else is saying is happening, that gets magnified. And I really struggle sometimes to keep myself safe. And there have been a number of times when the reason I got up that morning was so that I could take care of him. And there have been a lot of times when the reason I didn't, drive out into the wilderness or like walk into the ocean was because I didn't have arrangements for my cat. And I'm sorry, it sounds very bleak. It is, kind of a darker side of things. But yeah, he's been amazing.
Is there anything that triggers from like, as if a listener here is listening to your story, and they have maybe someone close to them that is dealing with something similar, how can they be a better friend or a better family member in the situation?
So I can only speak for myself. Oh, coffee! I can only speak for myself. There are a lot of things that people will say. There are a lot of right answers for this, which is to talk to them. Ask if you think somebody may be suicidal. Ask them. There's a lot of hesitation around it. There's a lot of discomfort. Like I don't want to make them uncomfortable if they're dealing with that. There is an older kind of concept that still floats around a little bit, where if I make words about it, then that's going to make it real. And then that's going to encourage them to do something to themselves.
I see.
And that's been shown that that's not the case. And talking about it helps. For myself, different things can trigger it, just because the complexity of my symptoms and where they came from. A huge range of things can trigger it. Often a sense of loneliness, a sense of rejection. Whether or not those things have happened, the feeling that they've happened can trigger an episode. And personally, what I need most is unsolicited positive affirmation and company. Not suicide watch. Like, you shouldn't be required to do suicide watch for people in your life if that's not where you're at. You can only be there for somebody to a level that's healthy for you. Otherwise, the whole situation has a tendency to spiral. But just company, just a distraction. I'm not sitting around in my head, laying on the couch, like weeping into a blanket, listening to sad music and just making it worse. There's somebody in the building who doesn't feel bad being around me. My being sad and my struggle isn't a burden. And they're showing that because they want to interact. Some people do best when they get out of the house for a walk. Some people do best when they get invited to hang out. Some people do best with like a long phone call. There are times in my life when I've set things up with friends where this friend messaged me on Sundays, and this friend messaged me on Wednesdays, and this other friend would message me randomly once a week, and they would just send, hey, this is something about you that I appreciate. This is something about you that I like. I like watching you talk about your interests. We had so much fun on that trip that one time. I'm so excited to see you in a month, whatever. And just having those positive messages, it makes such a big difference. And it doesn't have to be an emergent situation where if I don't send you a positive message and if I don't stay there and keep knives and medicines away from you, you're gonna die. But just put positivity into the world and let them know that they're not weighing you down and that you're not uncomfortable around them. Just having people be okay with me being where I'm at makes all the difference in the world.
Did you struggle with this pre-PTSD mildly, and then the PTSD kind of exaggerated or increased that, or is this something that just directly after your service in the military, it kind of skyrocketed?
Ooh, so that's very hard for me to answer. Okay. So my parent who raised me was diagnosed later on in her life with as she was sociopathic, or what do they call it now? Antisocial personality disorder. But the DSM-4, it was sociopathy, and she was a malignant sociopath. There are people who have sociopathy diagnoses who are not malignant. They struggle with empathy, and they're aware of that. So a lot of people will go out of their way to cultivate their lives so that they treat people around them well, despite that diagnosis. So what my mother had was a malignant version of that. She was very predatory. She was very abusive. She was very contradictory. So I grew up, the way I like to describe it is I kind of grew up in a cult of two. She made sure that it was just the two of us. We moved around at least once a year. We were not connected to our family. And it was just her and I against the world kind of a thing. And then when I was 10, she went away. And weirdly, I was unprepared for the real world. So there's just always been this sense of dissonance and this sense of not knowing who I am and this sense of like having to perform okayness and having to perform different aspects of a personality just to stay safe. So I will say that my military service exacerbated that. Just military culture in general is pretty hard to deal with. I am femme presenting, and so in my career field, I went into a particularly male-dominated career field. I was a munitions technician, and I think in the bomb dump, that's all the different. That's the collection of all the different shops. So there's like bombs, missiles, bullets, et cetera, et cetera. So all of those shops together, I think there were maybe 2,000 people, and maybe 100 of those were women. And so there was a lot of pressure to, you have to be, can I swear?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of pressure, like you have to be a bitch, or you have to be kind of slutty, or you have to be crazy and weird, and those were the only real acceptable categories, or you have to be like masculine. And so those were the only real acceptable categories of performance in that culture, and that by itself was damaging. And then there's a lot of toxic masculine traits. There's a lot of dehumanizing of other cultures. There's a lot of xenophobia. There's a really weird take on white supremacy in the U.S. military, because so much of the military is made up of people of color. It can't be culturally overt. You know what I mean? But it's always there, and it's there in ways that we don't recognize based on our larger cultural experience in America. So it's very gaslighty. My experience was it was very gaslighty. I couldn't get into the culture, so I had to live with this constant barrage of messages that like, this is what it's like and this is who you are. I was assaulted by one of my supervising officers in the military, and it was covered up. I was threatened with a dishonorable discharge if I reported it, and I ended up having a breakdown. I attempted suicide. I ended up in the hospital. And then when I came back, they were like, oh, well, we don't want you to work on explosives. And I was like, oh, you think? Yeah. Maybe.
That is crazy.
So I tried to stay, and in a really weird move, after about 3 weeks, so I left the hospital, and I came back to my job, and they said, well, you can't work in the maintenance bay anymore because we don't want suicidal people handling munitions. So we're going to put you in the office. And then after a couple weeks in the office, they effectively made me the personal assistant for the man who had assaulted me.
That is crazy.
Because we'd had our mediation and we'd worked things out.
Oh my goodness.
So I ended up having another breakdown.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want out. I am super fucking done.
Yeah.
And they let me go without a fight, which in retrospect is a very strong indicator that they knew what had happened. They
Yeah.
were aware of the situation, because you don't just get to say, "Oh, I'm struggling and I want to go home,"
Mm-hmm.
you know. And that made it almost impossible to hold a job for 12 years. I receive a disability payment through the VA,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how I pay my bills now, because being in a situation where, like, I would be pulled into an office to speak with typically a male supervisor, whether it was positive feedback or to be trained about something or to receive a reprimand or anything, regardless of what it was, just being in that situation was triggering. So they would call me into the office, even if it was just to say, hey, we just wanted to tell you you're doing a really good job. We're glad to be here. And the whole time I would just have, like, the alarm sound from Kill Bill?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so it's
100%,
just
yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that in the
Mhm.
back of my head. And then I would leave and I would just go hide in the bathroom for an hour and just bawl. And it's hard to hold down a job.
Yeah. I mean, that's some trauma. I understand.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so people don't want to pay an employee to cry in the bathroom for an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up just living on disability for over a decade.
Yeah.
And this work as a peer is the first time I have functionally been able to get back into a working scenario and feel comfortable and feel confident. And I still have those triggers, but with the help of the VA and with the extensive therapy that I've been able to receive, I can do it now. I can handle those symptoms. I can handle the triggers. I can respond to them in a healthy way. And I feel more whole
Yeah.
than I have honestly for most of my life.
Oh, I want to say you have an amazing story. I mean,
Thanks.
and I really love how you're really helping the community with your experience. There are a lot of people out there who don't know how to handle these situations, and kind of like you said before, I could imagine that you still don't necessarily know how to handle it completely, but you feel whole at the same
Yes.
time, and I feel that's a really good theme of this conversation and of you as a person.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, it's one of the things I've been thinking about leading up to this, because I could go on I literally could just ramble for hours about, like, skill building and dialectics and all of the different therapy modalities. But one of the things that kept coming up when I was trying to prep myself for this interview was the fact that, and I've said this several times, and it sounds very macabre, it sounds very dark, but, like, there are times when I daydream, I fantasize about running into the man who assaulted me, just like out in the wild. And just in kind of, not gonna lie, just in kind of a shitty way, just being able to walk up to him and be like, you know what? That worked out for me. Thank you. Because since it happened during military service, and since they knew what had happened, I've had access to therapy. I've had what basically amounts to universal basic income. I've had access to healthcare for coming up on 15 years now. And that is why I am where I am. If I hadn't had access specifically to these therapies, and to medications, I don't know how I would have handled it. And people in our community are so capable of recovery. They're so capable of learning these skills and learning how to manage their symptoms and learning how to respond to triggering events, learning how to respond to trauma in themselves and other people, if they just have the information, if they can just get the support. And there's such an unscalable paywall for most people.
Yeah.
So this just last year, I finally registered. I'm going back to school for social work. I'm getting a social work degree with my minor's sociology. And a huge part of my goal is, there's with all of the protests and the changing culture around police involvement in communities. One of the things people keep talking about is, okay, well, so let's take some money from here and let's put it into social support programs. Let's train social workers. Let's do all this stuff. And I want that. That's where I'm trying to go.
I see.
Is to be able to, as a peer, I can do skills coaching and I can do like the motivational interviewing. I can talk to people and I do that. But if I can get those letters behind my name, then I can actually start providing therapeutic services for the community. I can start teaching other people, these are these skills and this is how to implement them. Tell your friends, and I can start kind of like taking that information out of this academic, sort of privatized area and just disseminating that to our people. Because if we learn the skills, we can all become functional and feel functional and feel better about ourselves and get to a place where we're not waiting to heal. How am I trying to put this? We can get to a point where we're not waiting for someone to provide us with therapy so that we can heal.
I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So that's exciting. And I'm trying not to cry now. But yeah, that's just kept coming up with, like, we have people who don't have access to fucking water, for the love of God, let alone someone to sit down and tell them that they're okay. So
you're doing really beautiful work.
Thanks. I'm trying.
I'm really proud to have you as a guest. And I'm sure there are a lot of people listening who are going to be able to relate to a lot of things that you're saying. Because, in general, just on the basic standards, depression is something that a lot of people struggle with. Yeah. And there are not a lot of tools out there to provide to these people who are dealing with that.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I just got so excited because
Yeah.
this is one thing that I do want to make sure that I get out there. So like I wanted to, like, I had this whole thing. I wanted to sit down and like talk about, like, there's a skill for helping to curb panic attacks and anxiety attacks, and I wanted to talk about that and all this stuff. One thing I really, really, really want to say is there's so much information out there on the internet about how do I curb a panic attack, how do I deal with depression, how do I, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Therapy-wise, if I had been given one message early on, it would have been to make shit work for you. I have ADHD. I can't sit and meditate on leaves on a stream, right? I can't bring myself to sit and just watch my breath and not think about other things. I physically am incapable of doing it. But what I can do is I can do mindfulness by sitting and enjoying the feel of yarn between my fingers while a movie plays in the background. That's meditative. I can't skateboard, but I have friends who skateboard. That's meditative. Dancing can be meditative. You can process trauma. You can heal by taking the concept behind, like, you'll go online and let's say, okay, so count your breath and put an ice pack on your neck and, go for a nice nature walk, right? And those are all lovely and that's fine. But the goal of counting your breath is to be present in your body. If drumming on your knees makes you feel present, do that. The goal is to get back inside your body, out of your head. It's not to count your breath. Does that make sense?
No.
So you can go out and you can find this information and if you can try and figure out what the point is behind it, you can find other ways to get there, and you can make these modes of therapy and you can make these ways of coping accessible for you. And you don't have to follow instructions. Basically would be my big thing.
I have ADHD, so I feel everything that you're talking about. And I've tried meditation and it does not work. No. So I really like kind of focusing on, that's also been the thing, right? Focusing on what works for you.
Yes. Yes.
And I think
Yeah.
that's a great way to kind of look at.
And there's this idea of mindfulness and meditation and emptying your mind of thought and being present and like that's all lovely. That's fine. But if I can just be present in my body in the real moment without thinking about tomorrow, without thinking about yesterday, without thinking about what's going to happen when I'm done, if I can just be with myself for 5 minutes, if I'm spinning yarn, if I'm reading a book, if I'm drawing, it doesn't matter. That's what I'm doing. I'm being right there, just doing that in that moment. That's the break your brain needs. You don't need to be peaceful and sit in lotus position and have a cushion. A lot of people, they live in combined households. They have too many people in their homes to have that quiet environment. So if you just go and literally, and I've done this, I will go sometimes and I'll stand close to a surface, so like in a corner, and I'll just touch the texture on the walls. And it could just be a few moments. You just stand there for like an hour, just like, kind of tweaking out on the texture, but like, just be there for a minute. And it doesn't have to be this big fancy, it doesn't have to be this big thing. It's accessible. It's so accessible. But culturally, we make it seem like it's not, and it is. It's right there. You can have it. You've got everything you need, and you're gonna be okay.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Like I said, I have ADHD, so I definitely feel every word that you were saying about that. Let's see here. We only have.
So good. Oh yeah.
We only have like 10-ish minutes, but I wanted to quickly talk about the kombucha brewing. Because we're gonna touch on that. Yeah.
Yes. So I brew my own kombucha. It's another one of my I'll sit and talk about it for like a long time. And I don't I don't really know what to say about it. So how should I talk about it? Should I just like talk
How
about
did you get into it, maybe? And your experience, how much you enjoy it. Maybe someone else listening would also be.
So I really like the flavor of fermented things. I like that tanginess. And it makes my body feel good to have that. And kombucha's fucking expensive.
It is. It is.
Once again, white people have taken something that people of color have done for centuries, and they've gone, oh, this is lovely. I'm going to put it in a bottle and charge 500% for it. So I love kombucha. I love having it every day. I don't want to pay $5 a bottle.
Fair.
So you can get a SCOBY online. That's the culture. It's an acronym: Symbiotic Culture of Bacteria and Yeast. So SCOBY. And you can buy one online for $20. And then you brew tea. You let the tea cool off. You put in some preferably raw sugar, and then you put the SCOBY in it, and then you leave it alone for a week. And then you come back and you've got kombucha. And that's kind of it.
Really?
You can do fancy stuff, and you can put it in the flip top bottles, and you can add fruit flavoring or herbs, and you can get like really wild with it. But that's all it is. You need a jar, and you need like muslin and a rubber band and sugar and tea and a SCOBY, and that's it. There are a lot of people. So one nice thing about it is that the SCOBY, it's like this rubbery. People used to refer to it as a mushroom, so it's just like this chewy kind of disc that lives in there, and it grows. It lives off of the caffeine and the sugar and the tannins in the tea, and so it gets bigger. And so if you're making kombucha regularly, you end up with SCOBY that you have to give away. So go on to Facebook Marketplace, ask people if they have one. And I can almost guarantee you that you will get one. You can just have it for free because they get enormous. And then you can eat it, but it's not something you want to like stick in a Tupperware and snack on casually, so people get rid of them. So yeah, do it. It's really fun. I'm going to have a SCOBY coming up in a couple weeks that I need to get rid of. And yeah, it's another one of those things that it's so accessible, and it's so that people made this in jars in huts. Like it's fine. We can do it. Yeah, We can therapize ourselves, and we can grow kombucha and mushrooms and feed ourselves and support each other, and we don't need them.
So, are there any links you would like to plug other than the links that we've already talked about, or any websites or companies, organizations?
Not really. Just again that if you have donations, you are able to donate. So at kale-morse for the community outreach stuff. Should I share my email in case anyone has regular donations? I don't know. That feels
Maybe we'll hold off on that
weird,
because you
yeah.
never know, right?
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, it was weird. I was like, no. And then the Salt Lake COVID mutual aid. People need stuff. This is kind of the hub right now for if you have stuff, being able to get connected with people who need it. So those two things will be kind of it.
And then as wrapping up, I want to present to you the comic from Black Cat Comics.
Yay!
It's called Descender. The basic idea, or the summary of it without spoiling, is that it's about a conflict between two people. One sees the AI that inhabits their area as machines, and the other one sees them as humans. And they go on to kind of explore the idea of what that is in existence to that environment.
I love it. That sounds super exciting.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
And with that, I want to do a thank you for the sponsors. Rusted Box Records, Watchtower Coffee and Comics, which we are now, and Black Cat Comics. Again, Jack, I want to thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for
You're a
having me.
pleasure to talk to.
Just letting me ramble into the microphone. This was great. Bye.
All right, thank you.
Oh no! Oh god! I waited till the last minute to spill everything. That's good.
Okay. It's editing, right? We'll just edit that in your hand the entire time.
Yeah, perfect.
Thanks for listening to MOCHA Talk and Caffeine Dreams. Be sure to follow us online at MOCHA Talk Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, or on our website at mochatalkpodcast.com. Special thanks to our sponsors, Watchtower Coffee and Comics, Rusted Box Records, and Black Cat Comics. We'll see you on the next episode.